Computers and blues. Trust me.
Hello world, Lindsay here, liaison to the senior partners of Blackhorn and Lynx. Let's play CyberHyve.
New York. New research analyzing studies spanning 10 years on 180 stalkers revealed that stalkers often follow up their threats with physical assaults, but those attacks rarely lead to homicide, a psychologist said Monday. While some victims of stalkers may think they can end the stalking or harassment by meeting with the perpetrator, Reed Meloy, associate clinical professor of psychiatry at the University of California, San Diego, warned against that action, saying it just reinforces the obsession. Meloy, in a presentation at the annual meeting of the American Psychological Association, scrutinized cases of stalking in the scientific literature, including studies from England and Australia. The vast majority of the cases involve stalkers in the United States, and most frequently in New York or Los Angeles. Half the stalkers make threats against the object of their desire, and in 25% of the time, the threats result in a physical attack on the person, he said. Stalkers are dangerous, Meloy said. He said that anyone who becomes aware that they are the object of a stalker should contact law enforcement authorities whom, he said, are far more attuned to the danger of stalking now than they were even 5 years ago. In his overview of stalkers, Meloy also found that violence may be committed by those who don't threaten, but this is unusual. Violence is most likely to be a physical assault and battery without a weapon, the victim being grabbed, punched, struck, or fondled by the obsessional follower. Meloy said, contrary to what the public believes, the incidence of homicide in stalking cases is less than 2%. He said that violent attacks usually occur as a result of the stalker's rage following rejection or perceived rejection of his object. The number of women who stalk, Meloy said, is greater than one would expect to find in a criminal population, but male stalkers still outnumber women 3 to 1. Meloy found that stalking victims fall into 3 broad categories: those with whom the stalker has been intimate in the past, those with whom the stalker has met in an acquaintance setting such as at work or in a social gathering, and strangers. Although numbers are not yet available, Meloy said more than half of the stalking cases involved the acquaintance setting. The stalkers are not, as some people believe, a normal person who suddenly becomes smitten with another, Meloy said. The data he reviewed found that most of the stalkers have a previous criminal or psychiatric history, including multiple disorders. Meloy said a common belief is that stalkers generally suffer from erotomania, in which they believe that the object of their stalking is attracted to them. While some stalkers do have this disorder, Meloy said it is relatively rare. Other characteristics of the stalker: he's usually in his mid-30s, older than the general population of criminals, he has a history of failed heterosexual relationships, homosexual stalkings exist, but represent less than 1% of the total, he is often underemployed or unemployed, he is more intelligent than other offenders. New York. New York police are unraveling a bizarre tale that ended when a 60-year-old man collapsed from a heart attack after shooting an ex-cop who was stalking the man's police officer daughter. Police say the dead man, who was thrown off the force in January for ignoring orders, had been arrested just 4 days earlier for stalking the woman. Peking. A Chinese newspaper reports Rubik's Cube is triggering insomnia, high blood pressure and even insanity in its sweep of popularity across China. The Magic Cube disease has started tormenting people, the Peking Evening News said Thursday. A solemn editor's note accompanying the article declared, "We would like to remind the readers here that although the Magic Cube could be good for the exercise of human intelligence, we should not forget that its side effects could bring us harm." The newspaper said some people have become more irritable and others could not sleep because they failed to solve the multicolored block. Also, not a few Magic Cube fans have a tendency to have higher blood pressure or even become mentally abnormal from playing the Magic Cube, it said. What is especially serious is that the Magic Cube has caused many people to lose interest in their work and students to ignore their studies, the newspaper said. São Paulo, Brazil. Residents of a farm town in southern Brazil will be looking warily over their shoulders as Holy Week begins and, According to common belief, werewolves are more likely to prowl. Belief in werewolves is widespread and remarkably detailed. Maria Tavares de Lima, a folklorist, said Saturday of Jonopolis 8,500 residents. According to popular belief, the week before Easter is the peak time for the transformation of men and women into snarling, hairy beasts, usually wolf-like creatures but sometimes black dogs, pigs, or horses with human heads. Ms. de Lima spent 3 years questioning residents of Jonopolis, a farm town just 60 miles outside modern Sao Paulo, South America's most populous city. She wrote a book called Werewolf from the Interviews. Even middle-class people told me werewolf stories, she said. A government official in his 50s said he has seen werewolves on various occasions. One woman told Ms. de Lima that she heard a pack of dogs yelping in her garage one night several weeks before her baby was due. She was afraid to investigate until daybreak, when she opened the door and found a naked, hair-covered man sprawled on the floor. The woman claimed the intruder was a werewolf intent on devouring her unborn child. A man explained his method of spotting werewolves. You can tell a werewolf in daylight because he's pale, hirsute, has long ears and a crooked nose, and his hands have calluses because he uses them as paws at night, he said. Although legend has it that only a silver bullet can slay werewolves, residents of Jonopolis say they can be killed by beating them with tobacco cords or by drawing their blood with needles. Ms. de Lima said some werewolf sightings have a grain of truth. Lycanthropy, a disorder in which a person imagines he is a wolf, is a recognized mental disease. Sufferers believe they are really werewolves, killing livestock, and even attacking people, she said. The hallucinations of lycanthropy can be fed by communities where werewolf belief is strong. Miami. South Florida's version of Bigfoot reportedly has been seen by people in remote areas of the Everglades after a nearly 20-year hiatus in sightings. The Miami Herald reports recent sightings of the so-called skunk ape have come from stands of cypress trees near rural Ocho P, 40 miles west of Miami. The strange creature, said to be 7 feet tall, covered with long hair and sporting a strong, skunk-like stench, is described as a distant relative of the Bigfoot, Pacific Northwest Sasquatch, or the Himalayan Yeti. A hairy, ape-like creature reportedly was spotted last week by a group of British tourists skirting the woods in an area west of Miami where wildlife usually abounds. Ocho P Fire Control District Chief Vince Durr also says he saw an upright, hairy creature 1 week ago crossing a road. Durr thinks it was someone wearing a gorilla suit and playing a prank, a scenario also considered plausible by the guide for the tourists who spotted the shadowy apparition. But some residents hold fast to the theory a strange creature lives in the Everglades, possibly evolving from a government experiment near Everglades National Park. There was a flurry of sightings in the 1970s following similar reports of Bigfoot and Sasquatch on the West Coast at a time when development was pushing westward from Miami toward the swampland. Southwest Florida residents say the renewed sightings could be the result of development around the Naples area, or the creature is being driven from its usual habitat by mosquitoes, which are reported to be especially bothersome this year. Moscow. The Soviet Union is back in the hunt for the abominable snowman. The official Soviet news agency said Tuesday Soviet scientists with the Society of Cryptozoologists will search for the legendary beast under the auspices of the Ministry of Culture. The society has its own charter, program, and budget, the agency said. The Soviets first searched for the abominable snowman 30 years ago when a special commission to investigate sightings was set up under the USSR Academy of Sciences. When it stopped hunting, the search for the mysterious man-beast was carried on by amateur enthusiasts who organized expeditions at their own expense and risk, TASS said. The news agency said the enthusiasts' scientific work was not impressive, though they had gathered material evidence of the snowman's existence, including footprints, photos, and short films. TASS said Soviet scientists have been following reports on the snowman in other countries. Sightings of the snowman have centered in Tibet, now part of China, where the beast man is known as the Yeti. Vergennes, Vermont. A Japanese television crew is in Vermont this weekend searching for the New England version of the Loch Ness Monster. The crew is filming on Lake Champlain, hoping to catch a glimpse of Champ, a monster rumored to live in the 120-mile lake that separates Vermont from New York State. I think there's something out there, said Akiko Ebvisawa, who works for the Tokyo Broadcasting System. She said she interviewed witnesses, and they seemed very decent. Dennis Hall of Vergennes, director of Champ Quest, says he has collected 18 sightings of the beast so far this summer, but adds that Champ is very shy. Native Vermonters may be pulling a prank as they confirm alleged sightings of the beast, but no one's laughing at the tourist dollars Champ is drawing into the region. They convinced the producers to hire 15 local boats to search the lake with cameras and sonar. Locals can thank the movie, Jurassic Park, for a wave of dinosaur fever now sweeping Japan, which apparently sparked interest in Vermont's elusive monster. Washington. Smithsonian Institution scientists have examined a videotape of the supposed Chesapeake Bay monster and are unable to identify the mysterious creature, an official said Monday. Dr. George Zug, chairman of the Department of Vertebrate Zoology at the National Museum of Natural History, said, in spite of the eyewitnesses' descriptions and the visual evidence, no identification, not even a tentative one, was offered for the strange sightings. A group of Smithsonian scientists and eyewitnesses met Friday to examine Robert and Karen Frew's videotape made on May 31 near their home in Kent Island, Maryland. The Frews said the videotape shows a serpent-like creature, measuring from 20 to 40 feet long dubbed Chessie. The scientists also examined photographs taken last year near the Choptank River by Catherine Pennington of Ellicott City that were also supposed to show the monster. Zug said the scientists concluded there was not enough visible evidence on the tape for a positive identification. However, he said, the Chessie phenomenon differs in many ways from the typical sightings of marine animals. He added, the usual explanations of a partially submerged log, a string of birds or marine mammals, or optical illusions, seem inappropriate for the dark elongated object. The meeting of the eyewitnesses and scientists was coordinated by Michael Frizzle of the Enigma Project, a group that studies paranormal events. West Pittston, Pennsylvania. A demonologist with purported recordings of ghostly activity inside a family's home says he will not release the evidence until it is reviewed by the Roman Catholic Church. Tempers exploded at a news conference Monday when Edward Warren, director of the New England Society for Psychic Research, offered no hard proof to back up his claim that the house is infested by demons. Show us something, one frustrated reporter shouted. Give us something to go with. We're giving you everything you're going to get, Warren shot back. If you can bring up a couple of priests here to help these people, fine. But we really don't have to give you anything. For one thing, you're too obnoxious. Warren said an exorcism is the only solution and, therefore, the church will get the evidence first. Jack and Janet Smurl say a malevolent force moved into their Chase Street duplex 18 months ago. The couple and their 4 daughters claim they have been subjected to physical abuse, ghostly apparitions, strange noises and other supernatural activity. A consultant to the Committee for Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, who said he had been invited by the Smurls to research the activity, was barred from the home when he arrived. Richard Bush, a professional psychic impersonator and chairman of the Paranormal Investigating Committee of Pittsburgh, argued with Warren and his wife, Lorraine, for several minutes before leaving the property. Accompanied by a physicist and a social worker, Bush said he wanted to conduct a critical, unemotional investigation. I want to open things up and look at things fairly and objectively, he said. Before we get to the paranormal, we should give science a chance to come up with a rational, unemotional explanation. The Warrens of Monroe, Con, claim investigators at the home earlier this year made sound recordings of hoofbeats, rappings and knockings, and filmed on videotape a shadowy, ghost-like specter. Warren said because the church alone can help the Smurls by conducting an exorcism, the church has priority to the recordings. The Reverend Gerald Mullally, Chancellor of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Scranton, said last week the church had asked an out-of-state priest who is an expert in parapsychology to look into the Smurl case. He said any decision to conduct an exorcism would become only after a careful investigation. London. About 50 primary school children in Scotland fainted in their classroom, apparently the victims of mass hysteria, health officials said. The children at St. Vincent's School in East Kilbride were rushed Friday by a fleet of ambulances to Air Myers Hospital and examined for possible gas inhalation. So far, no evidence of gas poisoning has been found, said Dr. William Thompson, Chief Medical Officer of Lanarkshire Health Board. The 50 children were released after being given a clean bill of health by doctors, and a hospital official said mass hysteria probably caused the fainting. Professor Archie Roy, an expert in paranormal incidents, said it was not uncommon for an event such as one child fainting to have a domino effect. Scottish Gas sent a team of engineers to the school to search for a possible gas leak, but none was found. Brasilia, Brazil. A giant gold nugget worth $1 million and the biggest ever found in Brazil was dug up by a prospector using the old-fashioned panning method, a Mines and Energy Ministry spokesman said Tuesday. The 137-pound, 80% pure nugget, which looks like a gold-plated meteorite, was found by prospector Julio de Deus Filho. Deus Filho is one of more than 10,000 prospectors using primitive sluicing and panning methods at the Serra Pelada mine, a remote, muddy encampment in the eastern Amazon state of Pará, some 1,200 miles northwest of Rio de Janeiro. Deus Filho found the nugget and sold it to a government bank for the equivalent of $1 million, the spokesman said. He was not immediately available for comment on his newfound wealth. The nugget, which is the largest ever found in Brazil and may be the second largest in the world, will go on display at a Brasilia museum, said the spokesman. The largest gold nugget was found October 19, 1872 in New South Wales, Australia, and weighed 472 pounds. Albuquerque, New Mexico. Researchers at the University of New Mexico have confirmed the discovery of a new type of material never before observed in the solar system. Researchers said the mixture of graphite and iron oxide may be as old or older than the solar system and may have been the major source of iron in the solar system, including the Earth's core. Dr. Klaus Kiel, director of the UNM Institute of Meteoritics, said the material was first discovered in a 27-pound meteorite found near Dimmitt, Texas. The meteorite apparently fell to Earth some 300 years ago. The exact date it was discovered is not known, Kiel said. Kiel said the discovery will allow us to get a feeling of what the material in our solar system was like before the planets came to be. Dr. Jeffrey Taylor, a member of the research team which discovered the element, said the discovery was important because carbon and iron are the most abundant elements in the solar system. If we have an assemblage of these elements, then they may play an important role in the formation of planets, said Taylor. Planets like Earth and Venus have iron cores, and this may be the source of those cores. Tests have not proved conclusively that the material discovered in the meteorite predates the solar system, but Kiel said it is still very ancient. It was at least around at the very beginning of our solar system if not before, he said. The discovery was made about 8 weeks ago while the researchers were studying the makeup of meteorites and looking other types of fragments in the rocks. Calimera, Italy. 10 dolphins have washed ashore on the heel of the Italian boot in the last 3 days, leaving scientists puzzled by the beachings. Dr. Roberto Basso, director of Calimera's Natural History Museum, said all of the animals were dead when discovered. Basso said he performed autopsies on several of the animals Monday but discovered no clues on the cause of death. The animals' stomachs were empty, apparently ruling out the possibility of an accidental poisoning, and Basso described the deaths as apparent mass suicide caused by unknown reasons. On March 3, 1972 at 1 a.m., Loveland police officer Ray Shockey was driving on Riverside Drive near the Totes Boot factory and the Little Miami River when an unidentified animal scurried across the road in front of his vehicle. The animal was fully illuminated in his vehicle's headlights, and he described it as 3 to 4 feet long and about 50 to 75 pounds, with leathery skin. He reported spotting the animal, crouched like a frog, before it momentarily stood erect to climb over the guardrail and back down towards the river. 2 weeks after the incident, a second Loveland police officer, Mark Matthews, reported seeing an unidentified animal crouched along the road in the same vicinity as Shockey's sighting. Matthews shot the animal, recovered the body, and put it in his trunk to show Officer Shockey. According to Matthews, it was a large iguana about 3 or 3.5 feet long, and he didn't immediately recognize it because it was missing its tail. Matthews speculated the iguana had been someone's pet that either got loose or was released when it grew too large. According to Matthews, Shockey was shown the dead iguana and confirmed it was the animal he had seen 2 weeks previously. Matthews recounted the incident to an author of a book about urban legends, but says the author omitted the part that confirmed that the creature was an iguana rather than a frogman. Sympathetic magic has been considered in relation to Paleolithic cave paintings such as those in North Africa and at Lascaux in France. The theory, which is partially based on studies of more modern hunter-gatherer societies, is that the paintings were made by magic practitioners who could potentially be described as shamans. The shamans would retreat into the darkness of the caves, enter into a trance state and then paint images of their visions, perhaps with some notion of drawing power out of the cave walls themselves. This goes some way towards explaining the remoteness of some of the paintings, which often occur in deep or small caves, and the variety of subject matter, from prey animals to predators and human handprints. In his book Primitive Mythology, Joseph Campbell stated that the paintings were associated with the magic of the hunt. For him, this sympathetic magic was akin to a participation mystique, where the paintings, drawn in a sanctuary of timeless principle, were acted upon by right. In 1933, Leo Frobenius, discussing cave paintings in North Africa, pointed out that many of the paintings did not seem to be mere depictions of animals and people. To him, it seemed as if they were acting out a hunt before it began, perhaps as a consecration of the animal to be killed. In this way, the pictures served to secure a successful hunt. While others interpreted the cave images as depictions of hunting accidents or of ceremonies, Frobenius believed it was much more likely that what was undertaken in the paintings was a consecration of the animal effected not through any real confrontation of man and beast but by a depiction of a concept of the mind. In 2005, Francis Thackeray published a paper in the journal Antiquity, in which he recognized that there was a strong case for the principle of sympathetic magic in southern Africa in prehistory. For example, a rock engraving from Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, dated at 4,000 years before the present, BP, showed a zebra which had probably been symbolically wounded, with incisions on the rump being associated with wounds. Ochre on the engraved slab could represent blood. A prehistoric rock painting at Melikane in Lesotho shows what appear to be men, shamans, bending forward like animals, with two sticks to represent the front legs of an antelope. Thackeray suggests that these men, perhaps shamans, or medicine men dressed under animal skins, were associated with hunting rituals of the kind recorded by H. Lichtenstein in 1812 in South Africa, in which a hunter simulated an antelope which was symbolically killed by other hunters, in the belief that this was essential for a successful hunt. Such rituals could be represented in prehistoric art such as paintings at Melikane in Lesotho. Thackeray suggests that the Melikane therianthropes are associated with both trance and the principle of sympathetic hunting magic. In 2005, in the journal Antiquity, Francis Thackeray suggests that there is even a photograph of such rituals, recorded in 1934 at Logagen in the southern Kalahari, South Africa. Such rituals may have been closely associated with both roan antelope and eland, and other animals. In the Brandberg in Namibia, in the so-called White Lady panel recorded by the Abbé Henry Breuil and Harold Pager, there are symbolic wounds on the belly of a gemsbok-like therianthrope catalogued as T1, which might relate to the principle of sympathetic hunting magic and trance, as suggested by Thackeray in 2013. At the Apollo 11 cave in Namibia, Eric Wendt discovered mobile art about 30,000 years old, including a stone broken in two pieces, with a gemsbok-like therianthrope that closely resembles the Brandberg therianthrope which Thackeray catalogues as T1. Both examples of art may be related to sympathetic hunting magic and shamanism. In 2013, Thackeray emphasized that in southern Africa, the principle of sympathetic hunting magic and shamanism trance were not mutually exclusive. However, as with all prehistory, it is impossible to be certain due to the limited evidence and the many pitfalls associated with trying to understand the prehistoric mindset with a modern mind. A mollified man, or a human mummy confection, was a legendary medicinal substance created by steeping a human cadaver in honey. The concoction is detailed in Chinese medical sources, including the Benko Gangmu of the 16th century. Relying on a second-hand account, the text reports a story that some elderly men in Arabia, nearing the end of their lives, would submit themselves to a process of mummification in honey to create a healing confection. This process differed from a simple body donation because of the aspect of self-sacrifice. The mollification process would ideally start before death. The donor would stop eating any food other than honey, going as far as to bathe in the substance. Shortly, the donor's feces and even sweat would consist of honey. When this diet finally proved fatal, the donor's body would be placed in a stone coffin filled with honey. After a century or so, the contents would have turned into a sort of confection reputedly capable of healing broken limbs and other ailments. This confection would then be sold in street markets as a hard-to-find item with a hefty price. Before humans went into space in the 1960s, several other animals were launched into space, including numerous other primates, so that scientists could investigate the biological effects of space flight. The United States launched flights containing primate passengers primarily between 1948 and 1961, with one flight in 1969 and one in 1985. France launched two monkey-carrying flights in 1967. The Soviet Union and Russia launched monkeys between 1983 and 1996. Most primates were anesthetized before liftoff. Overall, 32 non-human primates flew in the space program, none flew more than once. Numerous backup primates also went through the programs but never flew. Monkeys and apes from several species were used, including rhesus macaque, crab-eating macaque, squirrel monkeys, pig-tailed macaques, and chimpanzees. United States. Enos, the third great ape and only chimpanzee to orbit the Earth, being prepared for launch on Mercury Atlas V, November 29, 1961. The first primate astronaut was Albert, a rhesus macaque, who on June 11, 1948, rode to over 63 kilometers on a V-2 rocket. Albert died of suffocation during the flight. Albert was followed by Albert II, who survived the V-2 flight but died on impact on June 14, 1949, after a parachute failure. Albert II became the first monkey and the first primate in space as his flight reached 83 miles, past the Kármán line of 100 kilometers taken to designate the beginning of space. Albert III died at 35,000 feet in an explosion of his V-2 on September 16, 1949. Albert IV, on the last monkey V-2 flight, died on impact on December 8 that year after another parachute failure. His flight reached 130.6 kilometers. Alberts, I, II, and IV were rhesus macaques while Albert III was a crab-eating macaque. Monkeys later flew on aerobee rockets. On April 18, 1951, a monkey, possibly called Albert V, died due to parachute failure. Yorick, also called Albert VI, along with 11 mouse crewmates, reached 236,000 feet and survived the landing. On September 20, 1951, the first monkey to do so, the dogs Desik and Tsigan had survived a trip to space in July of that year, although he died 2 hours later. 2 of the mice also died after recovery. All of the deaths were thought to be related to stress from overheating in the sealed capsule in the New Mexico sun while awaiting the recovery team. Albert VI's flight surpassed the 50-mile boundary the U.S. used for space flight but was below the international definition of space. Patricia and Mike, 2 cynomolgus monkeys, flew on May 21, 1952, and survived, but their flight was only to 26 kilometers. On December 13, 1958, Gordo, also called Old Reliable, a squirrel monkey, survived being launched aboard Jupiter AM-13 by the U.S. Army. After flying for over 1,500 miles and reaching a height of 310 miles before returning to Earth, Gordo landed in the South Atlantic and was killed due to mechanical failure of the parachute recovery system in the rocket nose cone. Able on display at the National Air and Space Museum. On May 28, 1959, aboard the Jupiter AM-18, Able, a rhesus macaque, and Miss Baker, a squirrel monkey from Peru, flew a successful mission. Able was born at the Ralph Mitchell Zoo in Independence, Kansas. They traveled in excess of 16,000 kilometers per hour, and withstood 38 G. Able died June 1, 1959, while undergoing surgery to remove an infected medical electrode, from a reaction to the anesthesia. Baker became the first monkey to survive the stresses of spaceflight and the related medical procedures. Baker died November 29, 1984, at the age of 27 and is buried on the grounds of the United States Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. Able was preserved, and is now on display at the Smithsonian Institution's National Air and Space Museum. Their names were taken from the 1943 to 1955 U.S. military phonetic alphabet. On December 4, 1959, from Wallops Island, Virginia, Sam, a rhesus macaque, flew on the Little Joe 2 in the Mercury program to 53 miles high. On January 21, 1960, Miss Sam, also a rhesus macaque, followed, on Little Joe 1B although her flight was only to 8 miles in a test of emergency procedures. Chimpanzees Ham and Enos also flew in the Mercury program. The names Sam and Ham were acronyms. Sam was named in homage to the School of Aerospace Medicine at Brooks Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, and the name Ham was taken from Holloman Aerospace Medicine at Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico. Goliath, a squirrel monkey, died in the explosion of his Atlas rocket on November 10, 1961. A rhesus macaque called Scatback flew a suborbital flight on December 20, 1961, but was lost at sea after landing. Bonnie, a pig-tailed macaque, flew on Biosatellite 3, a mission which lasted from June 29 to July 8, 1969. This was the first multi-day monkey flight but came after longer human space flights were common. He died within a day of landing. Spacelab 3 on the Space Shuttle flight STS-51B featured two squirrel monkeys named number 3165 and No 384-80. The flight was from April 29 to May 6, 1985. France. France launched a pig-tailed macaque named Martine on a Vesta rocket on March 7, 1967, and another named Pierrette on March 13. These suborbital flights reached 243 kilometers and 234 kilometers, respectively. Martine became the first monkey to survive more than a couple of hours after flying above the international definition of the edge of space. Ham and Enos, launched earlier by the United States, had been chimpanzees. Soviet Union and Russia. The Soviet/Russian space program used only rhesus macaques in its Bayan satellite program in 1980s and 1990s. The names of the monkeys began with sequential letters of the Russian alphabet. The animals all survived their missions but for a single fatality in post-flight surgery, after which the program was cancelled. The first monkeys launched by Soviet space program, Abrek and Bayan, flew on Bayan 6. They remained aloft from December 14, 1983 to December 20, 1983. Next came Bayan 7 with monkeys Verny and Gordy from July 10, 1985 to July 17, 1985. Then Dryoma and Eurosha on Bayan 8 from September 29, 1987 to October 12, 1987. After returning from space, Dryoma was presented to Cuban leader Fidel Castro. Bayan 9 with monkeys Zakanya and Zabi Yaka followed from September 15, 1989 to September 28, 1989. The two took the space endurance record for monkeys at 13 days, 17 hours in space. Monkeys Ivisha and Krish flew on Bayan 10 from December 29, 1992 to January 7, 1993. Krish produced offspring, after rehabilitation upon returning to Earth. Lapik and Multik were the last monkeys in space until Iran launched one of its own in 2013. The pair flew aboard Bayan 11 from December 24, 1996, to January 7, 1997. Upon return, Multik died while under anesthesia for U.S. biopsy sampling on January 8. Lapik nearly died while undergoing the identical procedure. No follow-up research has been conducted to determine whether these two incidents, together with the 1959 loss of the U.S. monkey able in post-flight surgery, contraindicate the administration of anesthesia during or shortly after space flights. Further U.S. support of the Bayan program was cancelled. Argentina. On December 23, 1969, as part of the Operación Navidad, Operation Christmas, Argentina launched Juan, a tufted capuchin, native to Argentina's Misiones province, using a two-stage Rigel 04 rocket. It ascended perhaps up to 82 kilometers and then was recovered successfully. Other sources give 30, 60, or 72 kilometers. All of these are below the international definition of space. Later, on February 1, 1970, the experience was repeated with a female monkey of the same species using an X-1 Panther rocket. Although it reached a higher altitude than its predecessor, it was lost after the capsule's parachute failed. China. The PRC spacecraft Shenzhou 2 launched on January 9, 2001. It is rumored that inside the re-entry module, precise information is lacking due to the secrecy surrounding China's space program. A monkey, dog, and rabbit rode aloft in a test of the spacecraft's life support systems. The SZ-2 re-entry module landed in Inner Mongolia on January 16. No images of the recovered capsule appeared in the press, leading to the widespread inference that the flight ended in failure. According to press reports citing an unnamed source, a parachute connection malfunction caused a hard landing. Iran. On January 28, 2013, AFP and Sky News reported that Iran had sent a monkey in a Pishgam rocket to a height of 72 miles and retrieved shipment. Iranian media gave no details on the timing or location of the launch, while details that were reported raised questions about the claim. Pre-flight and post-flight photos clearly showed different monkeys. The confusion was due to the publishing of an archive photo from 2011 by the Iranian student news agency, ISNA. According to Jonathan McDowell, a Harvard astronomer, they just mixed that footage with the footage of the 2013 successful launch. On December 14, 2013, AFP and BBC reported that Iran again sent a monkey to space and safely returned it. Rhesus macaque Aftab and Fargum were each launched separately into space and safely returned. Researchers continue to study the effects of the space trip on their offspring. Animals in space originally served to test the survivability of spaceflight, before human space flights were attempted. Later, other non-human animals were flown to investigate various biological processes and the effects microgravity and spaceflight might have on them. Bioastronautics is an area of bioengineering research which spans the study and support of life in space. To date, 7 national space programs have flown animals into space: the Soviet Union, United States, France, Argentina, China, Japan, and Iran. A wide variety of animals have been launched into space, including dogs, cats, tortoises, mice, rats, rabbits, birds, frogs, and insects. During the 1950s and 1960s, the Soviet space program used a number of dogs for suborbital and orbital space flights. 2 tortoises and a variety of insects were the first inhabitants of Earth to circle the Moon, on the 1968 Zond 5 mission. In 1972 5 mice, Fei, Phi, Fo, Fum, and Fui, orbited the Moon a record 75 times in Apollo 17's Command Module America, the last crewed voyage to the Moon. The first animals sent into space were fruit flies aboard a U.S. launched V-2 rocket on February 20, 1947 from White Sands Missile Range, New Mexico. The purpose of the experiment was to explore the effects of radiation exposure at high altitudes. The rocket reached 68 miles in 3 minutes 10 seconds, passed both the U.S. Air Force 50 miles and the International 100 kilometers definitions of the boundary of space. The Blossom capsule was ejected and successfully deployed its parachute. The fruit flies were recovered alive. Other V-2 missions carried biological samples, including moss. Albert II, a rhesus monkey, became the first monkey in space on June 14, 1949, in a U.S. launched V-2, after the failure of the original Albert's mission on ascent. Albert I reached only 30 to 39 miles altitude, Albert II reached about 83 miles. Albert II died on impact after a parachute failure. Numerous monkeys of several species were flown by the U.S. in the 1950s and 1960s. Monkeys were implanted with sensors to measure vital signs, and many were under anesthesia during launch. The death rate among these monkeys was very high. About 2/3 of all monkeys launched in the 1940s and 1950s died on missions or soon after landing. On August 31, 1950, the U.S. launched a mouse into space, 137 kilometers, aboard a V-2, the Albert V flight, which, unlike the Albert I-4 flights, did not have a monkey, but the rocket disintegrated because the parachute system failed. The U.S. launched several other mice in the 1950s. On July 22, 1951, the Soviet Union launched the R-13A1 flight, carrying the dogs Tsigan and Dezik into space, but not into orbit. These 2 dogs were the first living higher organisms successfully recovered from a space flight. Both space dogs survived the flight, although one would die on a subsequent flight. The U.S. launched mice aboard spacecraft later that year. However, they failed to reach the altitude for true space flight. The second ever orbiting spacecraft carried the first animal into orbit, the dog Laika, launched aboard the Soviet Sputnik 2 spacecraft, nicknamed Mutnik in the West. Laika died during the flight, as was intended because the technology to return from orbit had not yet been developed. At least 10 other dogs were launched into orbit and numerous others on suborbital flights. The last flight of Columbia carried silkworms, garden orb spiders, carpenter bees, harvester ants, and Japanese caliphfish, Medaka. Nematodes, C. elegans, from one experiment were found still alive in the debris after the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster. C. elegans are also part of experiments aboard the International Space Station as well as research using quail eggs. Earlier Space Shuttle missions included grade school, junior high and high school projects. Some of these included ants, stick insect eggs and brine shrimp cysts. Other science missions included gypsy moth eggs. Bigelow Aerospace launched their Genesis I inflatable space module, containing many small items such as toys and simple experiments chosen by company employees that would be observed via camera. These items included insects, perhaps making it the first private flight to launch animals into space. Included were Madagascar hissing cockroaches and Mexican jumping beans seeds containing live larvae of the moth Cedia saltitans. Bigelow launched Genesis II, a near twin to Genesis I. This spacecraft also carried Madagascar hissing cockroaches and added South African flat rock scorpions, Hidogenes troglodytes, and seed harvester ants, Pagonomyrmex californicus. During the European Space Agency's Photon M3 mission, tardigrades, also known as water bears, were able to survive 10 days of exposure to open space with only their natural protection. On the same mission, a number of cockroaches were carried inside a sealed container and at least one of the females conceived during the mission. After they were returned to Earth, the one named Nadezhda became the first Earth creature to produce young that had been conceived in space. During the countdown of the STS-119, a free-tailed bat was seen clinging to the fuel tank. NASA observers believed the bat would fly off once the shuttle started to launch, but it did not. Upon analyzing the images, a wildlife expert who provided support to the center said it likely had a broken left wing and some problem with its right shoulder or wrist. The animal most likely perished quickly during Discovery's climb into orbit. STS-129 took painted lady and monarch butterfly larvae into space for a school experiment as well as thousands of C. elegans roundworms for long-term weight loss studies.